Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go. Okay, let's get started.
Yes.
So, right, we're going to talk about what we consume. So, do you want to go first? Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, I always say this is one of my favorite subjects, but what we consume, because I think that a lot of us don't realize how important what we're consuming is and how much of an effect that it's having on our lives. And when I talk about what we consume, I'm talking about the people that we hang around with, the TV we watch, the radio we listen to, the podcast we listen to, basically everything that we allow into our minds, including people at work, whoever it is. But I think that when it comes to sort of cultivating that positive mindset, which you and I are so obsessed with, it's one of the main things actually is being really mindful and really aware of what you are actually allowing into your mind. Because ultimately, when it comes to feeling good, which is, presumably everybody's aim, when it comes to feeling good, we don't realize how things like watching the news are affecting the way that we feel so much more than we can imagine. I mean, as you know, and I think we have actually touched on this subject before, but we thought it would be good to do an actual Monday motivation on it because it is so important. So, Polly, you already know this, but I stopped watching the news quite a few years ago, and I always start by saying it doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I don't know what's going on. It just means that I don't watch the news or read the news unless there is a specific story that I want to be properly informed about. But what it means is, rather than sort of sitting and watching the news for 2 hours of an evening and just ending up feeling absolutely shit and really anxious and really fearful and really worried, I'm really scared because of all the stuff that's going on in the world, it just means that you don't allow the news to affect your emotions and affect the way that you're feeling, because ultimately there is nothing we can do about. And whilst of course it's, we all want to be across it and we all want to know what's going on in the world, there is a difference between being aware of what's going on and consuming that content to the point that it's affecting the way that you feel about your life. So I always use the news as a really kind of main example of this whole subject, because I think it's so important. And I think there are many people who say, whether it's, I don't know, a big earthquake that's happened or another shooting in the US or whatever it is, unless we're actually going to do something to make it better, then really, how is it serving us or the people who are affected for us to sit and just read obsessively about it for 3 hours or watch or and then kind of go to work and then discuss it? And it's just not helpful. And again, that doesn't mean that I don't care. Of course I care. That's just, that goes without saying. But it's just not consuming it to the point where it's affecting the way that you feel, because it is. And I think that's the thing that people don't necessarily realize. And so, I mean, I'm really, and I know you are too, I'm incredibly careful about what I allow literally into my mind, because I'm very aware that it's affecting the way that I think and the way that I feel, and therefore the way that my life looks. And, when it comes to the people that we're hanging around with, I mean, everybody's heard that saying. I actually don't know who the hell it was originally. I know that James Clear said it in Atomic Habits, but I think it was said a long time ago that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. So if we're hanging around with people who are really negative, or who are really, whatever it may be, people who are bringing us down rather than lifting us up, people who make us feel bad about ourselves rather than make us feel good about ourselves, people who are, drains rather than radiators, if we're hanging around with those people on the regular, then that is going to affect the way that not only that we think and that we feel, but the way that we are and the way that we show up. So this really is it's such an important topic, and one that perhaps people don't always think about that much,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so many, I think so many of us just aren't aware of the constant bombardment that we're receiving from the world that we live in. And I think it's too easy nowadays just to accept this is how it is, and particularly with what's going on in the world, in the news. And I agree with you. We to have a certain awareness of big issues is really, really important, but to be bogged down in the nitty-gritty everyday news is really, I know for myself, it really gets me down. I think, I know that Giles, for example, my husband, he's a news junkie. He consumes it, but it doesn't get him down in the same way that it does me. He's able to sort of read it, kind of use that information. He kind of needs that information, but not let it not dwell on it. Whereas I can get very, very involved in a story. It can really affect how I feel. Gosh, I can cry at an advert. I feel it all. And I think if you're that kind of person who is very sensitive and does feel everything, you've really just got to be super aware of what you are consuming, as you say, and also, as you say, the people and the environments in which we put ourselves in. And I think it's very easy sometimes for us to be, it's almost easier to be with a group of people who are bringing you down and get involved in those conversations, rather than actually consciously making the decision to step away and go, no, I don't want to get involved in that conversation, because we're human beings and we all like that feeling of belonging, and we all want to be part of the group. And so if there's a group of people who are all moaning about the same thing, all going on about the same something which is really putting you in a downward spiral of emotions and feelings and making you basically feel quite shit, then it does take a lot to kind of go, no, I don't want to do that. So it has to be a conscious decision. So it's, but also not just people, but I think even, it's kind of what you're reading. I mean, it could even be your work, what you're doing. It's all that stuff you're consuming. And if it's making you feel heavy and not very good, then it's a real signal that, okay, it's time to try and start filling ourselves up with good stuff. Because when we do, and so things which are good, we could be doing things like listening to really great music, which, gosh, that for me, I just need to put on a great song, and that can shift immediately how I feel. I can move my body. If I didn't, dance around, go for a run, whatever, that can really change that state as well. And just having really good conversations can help as well, can't it?
Completely. And actually going back, speaking of conversations and going back to the people that we hang around with, like you say, if we're hanging around with people who aren't making us feel good, and I think one of the things is that, I don't know about you, but I'm really finding at the moment that there are so many people who are very quick to start moaning about the state of the world and the state of the government and the state of this and and whilst those things may be justifiable, and whilst we may be justified in thinking them or saying them, I just don't think that it's really about working out what is actually serving your life, and is it serving your life to be having endless conversations with people who are basically saying that the world has gone to shit and there's nothing to be happy about. I mean, funnily enough, I bumped into a guy who lives around the corner from where I live. He's not somebody I know very well, but he's kind of like, he's a local guy, so I've known him for years, and I occasionally bump into him. And I bumped into him I think it was a couple of months ago now, but I was like, hey, how you doing? La, la, la. And he was like, oh my God, basically saying everything is just so shit, isn't it? Like there's just nothing to be happy about. And he said something along the lines of, I haven't spoken to one person who's got anything good to say about life at the moment. And it's those sorts of people and those sorts of conversations that we have to be really careful about, because it is very easy. And not like you were saying just now, we can all get dragged into that. We're all human. It's very easy and somehow comforting almost, because we're used to having those sorts of conversations. But it's just so easy to get dragged into those kinds of conversations that really are not doing us any good, because how is it serving us to be focusing on all the things that are wrong with the world and all the sort of negativity? And so really that's what this is about, isn't it? And certainly from what I tend to do is I will, so for example, in the morning when I'm getting ready, and I think this is quite a big one actually, that kind of whole morning routine thing, because let's face it, I think probably most of us, or a large number of us, wake up, we've got the news going in the background, we've got the radio on, whatever it is, and there tends to be a lot of sort of serious conversations about whatever it is going on in the world on any given day. And again, yes, good to be across it, but do you want to be listening to that for an hour and a half before you get on the tube or get in your car to go to work? What I do instead is I will always listen for, and this includes like when I'm in the shower sometimes as well, I will listen either to my affirmations or I'll listen to an uplifting podcast. So every single morning, no matter what I'm doing that day, whether I'm going to work or whatever it is that I'm doing, the first wave of information that is going into my brain is good information, because I'm listening to essentially personal growth podcasts, spirituality podcasts, all of that kind of stuff that you and I talk about. But what that means is that I'm starting the day on a really positive note, because I've been listening to something interesting, something inspiring, rather than spending an hour and a half getting ready for work and doing whatever you do in the morning, listening to really negative content. Because of course it's, it sounds so simple and it is so bloody obvious, but one is going to mean that you leave the house feeling good, and one is going to mean that you leave the house feeling not that good, and the choice is ours ultimately.
Yep. A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you. It all comes down to choice, doesn't it? Again, we all have the choice on how we go about our day and how we choose to show up. We can, and I think, absolutely. And I think it's hard then when you've got a group of friends, perhaps, as well. You're right. In the morning, you have a choice. But I think when it gets tricky, sorry, I'm just being playing.
No.
It's tricky when you have a group of friends, and they are the ones who are kind of saying, like you're the person you bump into saying, "Oh my God, everything's really shit," and so that is when you have got to actually really decide, okay, I'm either going to just say it outright, like, come on, guys, this is really, why are we moaning and groaning and carrying on? Let's talk about something else and try and change the conversation. Or an even harder decision is to try and put distance between you and those friends and make a choice for yourself. It's all about choice, how we show up, what we can do to really help elevate our own states, because ultimately it's how we choose to perceive our life, and what's going on. It's the lens that we are choosing, because we've all got that option and that choice.
Yeah, completely. I think work can be quite a big one, because I think that work can be one of, lots of, I've worked in many different kind of work environments over the course of my adult life, and
some can be toxic.
Yeah, it can. It really can, because that everyone's sort of, and God, no, Jesus Christ, I'm far from perfect. I've absolutely been involved in many of those conversations, as we all have. But I think it's just cultivating that awareness. It all goes back to awareness. It's just cultivating that awareness. Like if you do work, say, in an office where, you go into the kitchen at lunchtime and everyone's just dying to kind of have a moan about this person or that person, or that aspect of the job or whatever it is. So I think in those kinds of situations, you do have a choice as to, and of course it's not always easy, because of course when you're actually in a situation like you're saying, when you're in a situation with your friends, it's not so easy to just go, I'm just not talking about this, goodbye, I'm not going to be involved in this. Of course it's not that easy, but there are things that you can do. So for example, if you're in the office, you know, you could choose instead to go out for a walk at lunchtime, or not hang around the water cooler. I can't believe I'm using the water cooler as an example, but it's always like, you always read about like conversations around the water cooler, don't you? You know, so you can, to an extent, choose to just remove yourself from those conversations. And also, it comes down to, really, I hate to say it, but it comes down to courage again, because ultimately it's our choice. And yes, maybe we are going to piss someone off, and that, I think that's part of the problem. We're all, especially women, we're so scared to piss people off. We don't want to say what we're actually thinking. We don't want to upset someone. We don't want to say, look, I take your point, but can we just focus on something? Can we change the subject now? Can we just not moan on about this for another 3 hours? And it does it's ultimately about taking responsibility for your own life. And if this is important to you, if it's important to you to feel good and to grow and evolve and change your life and make it better, then there are certain things that are going to be uncomfortable that we're going to have to do. And not being around people who are not good for us is one of those things. And yes, it is hard, but I think what you can do in between times, so in all those, you know, I think it's all the little sort of pockets in your day where, for example, when you're going for a walk, listen to something uplifting, or listen to uplifting music. If you're at home, I always do this, like when I'm at home kind of cleaning or washing up, I'm always listening to something that is really interesting or really inspiring or really motivational, rather than just having the news on the background or having the TV. I don't have a TV, but you know, I know some people tend to have the TV on in the background, but maybe change that and listen to, in those moments where you're cleaning or where you're cooking, or when you've got that kind of, you've got that sort of mental space where you're not interacting with anyone. That's when you can really use those pockets of time throughout your day to feed your mind with the stuff that you want to feed it with, whether that's audiobooks or podcasts, or, you know.
Yeah, and let's not forget that when we are feeding ourselves with, and we're feeling good and we're feeling those good feelings, then we're going to attract more of that goodness to us. Whereas if we're feeding ourselves with really scary news, which is making us feel all worried and nervous, anxious, and it's just going to lower our vibration, which means that then we're going to attract more of that sort of, those feelings towards us, or more of that stuff. And we're, you know, and that's why probably your friend, which you bumped into, who just said, oh my God, everybody around me, no one's got anything good to say, everyone's miserable, because he's attracting those sorts of people towards you. That's what you're saying. So it can really elevate your state to be really wary of what it is you are bringing into your lives and what you're listening to, what you're watching, what you're consuming.
Yeah, completely. Polly, I'm just wondering whether we should give some sort of tips on is there anything that you would suggest? I think particularly with the kind of people one is probably the most difficult, isn't it? Like, I guess, you know, I'm thinking, what can people actually, you know, proactively do? What I mean, I obviously said, you know, maybe go out in your lunch break, or do something different, or just remove yourself from a conversation. But is there anything that you do in those sorts of situations?
I mean, I just try to keep my mouth shut. If people are having a good old moan, I'll try and just keep my mouth shut, or I'll just try and sort of maybe find a bit of a silver lining. I mean, God, I'm not perfect at all. And yes, you know, sometimes I get involved, but I'm trying to be more and more aware of, just not getting involved in those conversations. I notice it with my family, with my kids, particularly if they're, you know, whinging about something. And obviously it's important to voice how you feel. I'm not saying don't feel those feelings, but I think it's, you know, feel what you're feeling, and then sort of accept it, and then just move through it. So I really, with the family, just try and get them not to dwell on something which has really upset them or pissed them off, or somebody, you know, or someone who they're hanging around with is upsetting them. It's just like, right, let's deal with it and move on. So it's not getting stuck into that. It's about just, just whatever you've got to deal with, face it, and let it go.
Totally. Polly, one sec. I've just got to let Johnny in. Hang on one sec.
Okay. Johnny's Lucy's cat.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'd locked the cat flap because he has a habit of bringing live rats into my flat.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And so I've started kind of locking the cat flap sometimes when he goes out. I'm just like, please don't have anything in your mouth. Anyway, he's in without a rat, which is great. Sorry.
Yes, the other things I would do. I mean, just generally, I think, you know, as we say, it's just about, you know, in terms of what you're bringing into your life. Yeah, put on a positive podcast, listen to positive music. Yeah, moving your body is a really good way just to kind of get rid of that any dense, heavy energy, and bringing in sort of fresh energy. Breathing, breath, that's a very good way. Conscious breath to change your state.
Yeah.
And sort of, you know, this is just about like changing out your energy, I suppose, more than what you're.
But also, I think it's what you were saying about focus. I think that's a really big one because, and you were saying about sort of not. I'm really sorry, my cat's now meowing really loudly. Can you hear him? Sorry. I'm gonna pick him up. Oh God, sorry, he's done a runner. But yeah, it's about kind of not allowing yourself to get like if you realize that you're stuck on a, because say you've been having a really negative conversation with some people and you come away feeling sort of deflated or feeling down or feeling worried or anxious, I think the key is, as long as you are aware that you're feeling that, then you can choose to move your focus on something else. And that's really the key, isn't it? To be able to be aware of what you're thinking and the fact that you're kind of going down that rabbit hole. But if you're aware of it, then you can change it. And it's just, and it really is. I was saying this on I had a membership call last night. I was saying it's, you know, it sounds really, really, really simple because it is really, really simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And it requires being vigilant all the time, you know?
Yeah. I don't think I've got anything else to say on that.
But the moral of the story is mind what you're consuming. Don't watch the news too much, and try and stay away from really negative people. Try and stay away from those kinds of conversations, because what you are allowing into your mind is affecting you and how you feel in your life.
Exactly.
I think that's the kind of key point, isn't it? That it really is, it's affecting people more than they perhaps realise.
And you have a choice. It might not feel like it, but you have the choice to turn the TV on. You have a choice to turn the radio on or off. You have a choice to what you listen to. You know, that the power is in your hands.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be constantly listening to the terrible state the world in, the terrible state the financial system, economic situation is. We can actually choose other things to consume and listen to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's all we got.
I think that's it.
But it's fine because we've done our 25 minutes. That's long enough.
Yeah, I think that's good. I was just, that was it. I was like, right, I think we've said it all. Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome. Hopefully that's been useful to somebody out there.
Hopefully, exactly. I think we all know this stuff, don't we? It's just sometimes just useful to have a little reminder about, you know, that we are actually in control, and we do have as I said, we have a choice.
Exactly that. So we'll be back next week talking about God knows what. We'll probably decide 5 minutes before we come on the live.
Something else, which hopefully might be useful to somebody somewhere.
Exactly. All right, have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. Bye, love. Bye.